Well, good morning and welcome to another talk with Father Terry Ryan. I'm Jan Scott, your host this morning. I'm being assisted by Jeff, and here it's another beautiful smoky day in Boulder, Colorado. Um, this is our Zoom meeting. Father Ryan is joining us all from Snowmass, Colorado at St. Benedict's Monastery. And Father Terry Ryan's talk today is a follow-up, and it's on contemplative prayer in a series of talks that he's given all over the United States over the years. The way the morning will go is first, Father Ryan will talk for 45 minutes-ish, and then there'll be a 5 or 10-minute break. Then there'll be a period for questions, and then there'll also be a meditation. There'll be a break and then a period of meditation, and then perhaps some more questions. We put up the Venmo account. I think it should be there in chat. If you want to make a contribution, it's Terry-Ryan-25, or you can mail a check to Terry Ryan, Father Terry Ryan, St. Benedict's Monastery, 1012 Monastery Road, Snowmass, Colorado, 81654. So that's it for me. Again, welcome everybody. And Terry, you are up.
Okay, so we don't have the Brady Bunch, right? All right, good. Thanks,
No.
Jeff. I thank you, Jeff and Jan, for hosting this event that is being recorded. And after it's recorded and we get a site where you can find it, that information will be put out to you as well. But thank you for coming on today. The previous talk and some of the background was a fellow named Vitalis Lahudi, a Carmelite, was on mental prayer. And now we're going to move into a much deeper prayer, which is the contemplative prayer. Mental prayer is not just chatting with God, but it's simplifying things a little bit, sort of paying attention to God. But we did all that, and that is recorded, so you can go back and look at that. But now we're being drawn. We're being drawn. That is, we don't make it happen. We give ourselves time. We have some sort of discipline so that we say, I'm giving a certain amount of time each day, but we don't make deeper prayer happen. We're drawn into it, but you're not going to be drawn into it just because you want it. So you're not going to become a more contemplative person unless you take the time. And God will work with the time. So now what you're being drawn into is an even simpler prayer. Now, what does that mean? Well, I think it means that the mind, all that thinking that's going on, and I mean discursive thinking, not a thought about God, but discursive thinking, one thought following another, that all begins to quiet down. You literally just have slower and fewer thoughts. And this sort of what we call quieting of the thoughts, quieting of the mind, it might be called, is so that it makes some space or some energy, because it takes time, it takes energy to be thinking. You don't realize this until your mind quiets down. How much energy we use with our thoughts, especially if we're, real getting crazy. So it's so the heart can speak. This is what you want to have happen. You want the heart to be able to speak. And what do we mean by that? What we mean is you're not focused on thoughts anymore. You don't notice thoughts except a particular thought of, say, it's as if your eyes were closed, you were looking into the darkness. All right. If you tried to do that, you would be thinking about Oh, I'm looking into the darkness. Oh, it's dark. I don't see anything. Oh, well. But here, when your eyes are closed, the darkness is not just dark, that is empty of light. You sense something. Well, who's sensing? That's the heart. And you are witnessing, if you will, a conversation, a wordless, almost thoughtless or without thoughts conversation, a relationship between God and your depth, which we call the heart. And some would call this an affective prayer. The affect is you are feeling something, you are aware of something, but you're aware of a presence and a connection to the presence, kind of almost a simple look, but your eyes are closed. What are you looking at? It's so simple that the question is, there's no what am I looking at? Because what has boundaries and borders? This is a presence that's all-encompassing, including encompassing you. It just is. It's an energy, if you will, that I call God. And some call it active contemplation. That is, the active part is you are participating, you're aware of it happening, you sat down, so you're involved, if you will. There's something deeper than that, but we'll say active contemplation. And now the heart is conversing with God without words or thoughts, but with some sense of feeling. So there's no word, there's no discursive thought. You're in darkness, but it's not dark. It's not empty darkness, but it's still duality. Still you and the presence, okay? Which means it's going to go deeper because there is such a thing as non-duality. We'll move towards that, whether we get there today or not. So it's a simple connectivity with this God. Now, if you were following Teresa of Avila, who was a Carmelite and did a lot of writings on contemplative prayer, this would be part of the illuminative way. She had purgative, which was more your mental prayer. Now the illuminative, and eventually a kind of a unitive, a non-duality unitive. Right now you're in the contemplative, a contemplative phrase called illuminative way for her. So, but let's put some words to this. You're drawn to this loving and being with. You just want to be with. You're not trying to get anything. Well, way back when, in your initial prayer, real beginner prayers, you're trying to figure things out. You're asking for things. You're trying to understand, and so on and so forth. Here, that's sort of behind you, or you're not attached to that at the very moment. It doesn't mean you're going to stop that kind of prayer, but you're just not attached to it. So you're drawn to this, just being with. You're just being with. In meditation, you're generally seeking some truth. When in my tradition, when we speak of meditation, you're meditating on something. So you're trying to get to you're trying to figure something out, to try and understand. One meditates on a scripture, looks at it and ponders it. It's called in Lectio Divina in some traditions. And you're trying to get the truth in it, to figure it out. People would be, say, and if they were in recovery, they would be reading the big book and they'd be looking at something and they wouldn't just be reading it discursively, one paragraph after the other, getting information. They would stop someplace and they would ponder a sentence or trying to figure it out. Well, that's more of a meditation way. It's not the contemplative way, but it's important. And it fits into this whole way of praying. So the meditation is more for beginners, if you will. Here, the prayer that I'm talking about, the more active contemplation, you're more resting in love, not knowledge. You're not trying to know stuff about God. You're not about to take out your journal and say, no, I'm going to write about all that happened in in this active contemplation, because not much is happening, but a lot of it is loving. And it's beyond description, beyond words. And all the mystics, when they try to write their books on this active contemplation, they say, whatever we say isn't really it, but this is the best we can do. So keep that in mind. They're writing about something that goes deeper than words. You're just resting in love, not knowledge. You don't want to know more about God. That's up in the head. You want to read about God, you can. We're a lot of Western religion. We're over-verbalized, and we're under-experienced. And what we need is more prayer of the experience of this affective contemplation, and less words, less talking, less focusing on dogmas and doctrines. They have their place, but not here. So you're resting in this love is what it is. And it's love because it's not about your pleasure. It's not about you feeling good. There's a place for that kind of prayer, and it's earlier. Here, it's about God's pleasure, not your pleasure. So, and the imagination is uninvolved. It's as if you're detached from it. It's almost as if it's been put to sleep. So you're not having, when I say you look into the darkness, you're not having holy card images. Well, in my tradition, we have a lot of holy cards. You're not having holy card images popping up in your head. Oh, I just saw an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary and so on and so forth. That's not what's going on. It may be going on, but that's not active contemplation. So the imagination's uninvolved. You're not having all kinds of images. It's just it's a presence in the darkness that is beyond words. And the will is also kind of silent. It's not energized. So you're not sitting there thinking, oh, let's see, should I sit here another 5 minutes and enjoy this? That's an yes or no. Well, the will would be very involved. You're not there. That's why we often have to have a little buzzer system, like our cell phone, that we set to go off at a certain time, because you could just go on with this. If you have lots of free time, you could just go on and on. Because time, you don't notice time. Time is part of our thinking. You're deeper than that. So the will is just not thinking about, the will is not willing one thing or the other. You're just here. And that's in order to just love. We know that when we read romantic literature, we read about how I am with my beloved and the time just passed and we never had enough time together, and it's so wonderful. I just never noticed the time passing, and so on and so forth. Well, this is something like that. So again, we're drawn. It's a grace, okay? We can't make it happen, but we can be with it when it's happening. And so we're drawn by this energy, this power, to give ourselves over to it. Not to say, okay, I'm going to give it 5 minutes, or okay, I'm going to do this as long as you make me feel this way, as long as I feel that way. No, you're just drawn to give yourself over to God without trying to decide what's going to happen. Trick here is kind of, when it first happens, you think, I'm going to do everything the same as I did before because I want to get the same feeling. It's probably not going to happen, because then you've taken control, and control's what you got to let go of. And so you're going to get a little bit more humility with this. You're going to find out, no, I don't control it at all. It's God's controlling. Just don't have expectations each time you sit down. You don't know if it'll be the same as it was before, different. You don't know. It's a relationship. It's dynamic. So you're not trying to get the same thing as you had before. Whenever you do that with another human being, it's always messed up. It's not. Relationships are dynamic. They're not static. They're not just always the same. So we want to give ourselves over to God, not give ourselves over to enjoy our own personal pleasures, because pleasures are all about me. So if you say, oh, I'm going to sit, I like active contemplation. Oh, yeah, I did that, Father, and it was really good. And so the next day I sat down to get that really good again, and it didn't happen. I said, well, here's why. Because it's all about you. It's all about you feeling good. No, I really love God. I said, let's go back over what you said. So I just sit down each day and try to just not have any great expectations, give myself over to God and God's pleasure, God's will. And we know that this attraction comes from God if it's for God's pleasure. And we don't say, I'm doing it to get. So we know, and that's probably why it happens seemingly out of the blue. Because if we thought we could make it happen, us Westerners, we would do the same thing over and over, trying to get the same results. It's dynamic, not static. So, the attraction comes from God when you didn't really have much to do with it happening. So now it's okay to use a book at the beginning of your sitting, but try to make it a book, not a series of books. A lot of people in recovery programs, there's tons of meditation books and so on in recovery programs, and they got 4 or 5 books, and they give themselves a half hour to do what is called step 11, prayer meditation, and they spend most of it looking at their little books. I said, one book, just to segue you from whatever you were doing or going, and it's a segue. And you don't have to read that daily reflection or daily chapter. If you find a word that attracts you, that's the energy in the darkness, if you will, inviting you to stop and just be, which is dynamic. So in here in the monastery, we get up we start at 4:30 in the morning. And so I'll show up. I don't know what I'm going to be like from one day to the next. Some days I show up and I think I'm just, so in love with God. And other days I can't get it together at all. Well, so what? I showed up. That's the important thing. And I'm putting aside the time. And we always read Psalms. So one of the monks, my turn will come and you read some Psalms. And I might not even hear the first Psalm. I might start listening to the second one. So that's our book. Our book is the Psalms, which are in the Hebrew scriptures of the Bible. So that's sort of the big book for Jews and Christians. So that's what we do. And hopefully that segues me from getting out of bed and here in the dark, sitting in this dark chapel. So, so in this deep prayer, you have in this active contemplation, you may have some affections. I said earlier, it can be called affective prayer. You feel it. Well, Lahudi comes from a Carmelite tradition. That's got a lot of feminine instincts to it. Teresa of Avila, Teresa of Lisieux, many others. They also has John of the Cross and Vitalis Lahudi. But the sense is, if you have an affection, an affective feeling about this power, let it be. It's not centering prayer, which, by the way, was founded by 4 Western men, in which it says, don't hold on to anything, just use your method and that you might detach from a feeling or a thought. Here, it's, if you have it, you have it. Don't suppress it or ignore it. Believe me, it'll pass. As it may be not that moment or that day, but God is dynamic. This energy that you're connected with, that you're feeling a sense of love, without defining it, is going to continue to move you along. So you have it. Now, at some point, this energy will invite us to something deeper or higher. which would be a contemplative prayer level of which we are totally unaware. That is where there'll be no sense of affectiveness. We won't feel anything. The time will pass and we don't even know it passed. But we'll be aware of something when we come out of it. That, of course, is infused by someone else. It had nothing to do with it. It's totally God. And when you're invited to that, you're invited to it. Well, but if you're not, don't worry about it. So try to stay where you are rather than try to get someplace else. Or as is often said, don't try to outrun grace. So if you have an affective sense of it, being all the things I've been talking about, being in the presence of, an awareness of, without defining it, it's kind of beyond thought, it's beyond words, it's the heart conversation with God. Just be there. That's grace. That's a gift. I mean, your mind could have been going crazy with what I often call now future think, where we just spend all of our sitting, our half hour or whatever, thinking about what I should have done, what I didn't do, what somebody did to me, or what I got to do later or should do later or ought to be, or just plain old fantasies. So enjoy the grace. Don't try to get rid of it. But definitely minimize your vocal prayers. We're not interested in vocal prayers at this point, at this particular time of being with the divine. We're not talking about things. That's another time. And even in the monastery, we put aside time for the talking prayers. Now, another way to look at this, if you were following Teresa of Avila, is she speaks of prayer of quiet. Okay, so another way to come at this, to look at prayer of quiet. So the noisy work of the intellect is disappearing, beginning to disappear. The intellect is very noisy to our hearts, to our insides. And so we begin to enjoy some spiritual sweetness. Teresa of Avila and a lot of these people who write about the spiritual path, especially as they write for Westerners, we love steps. We like ladders. Going up or going down deeper, we like steps. And so she writes about the prayer quiet, trying to figure out, well, how to context this thing for us Westerners. So the noisy work of the intellect begins to disappear. We enjoy some spiritual sweetness. It's not like intellectual sweetness. Intellectual sweetness is back there when we meditated on the scripture and got, aha, I now understand that. That's the sweetness of the intellect. This is something deeper. It's not about understanding. It's about loving. It's not about knowledge. It's about union, being with. And this kind of being with is what will transform us. A lot of people have knowledge, but it avails them nothing when it comes to being transformed into all God wants you to be. We can walk around with a lot of knowledge, but the same old bad habits. This kind of prayer is going to move you into better habits or a more virtuous life. So we're just in this, as she talks about prayer quiet, kind of repeating, re-emphasizing from a different angle what I've been talking about. You experience now in this prayer quiet a need, actual need to be alone with God. I don't want to sit in a congregation and sing hymns. I don't want to listen to somebody preach at me. I don't want to go to class and read theology or philosophy. I just want to be alone with God. It's not the same as depression or isolation. Isolation, you're alone with nobody. You're not even alone with yourself. So it's kind of you're drawn to just be with. And I think, so even if you were to sit in a group and say, we're going to sit in a group meditation, ultimately, you stop thinking about the other 19 people in the room, and because you get beyond thoughts and you're just with your God, maybe picking up on the energy of them, but you're alone. You're alone with the presence, whether there's anybody else in the room or not. So the will is, the nice thing about this prayer is you don't sit vacillating about, should I stay with it? Shouldn't I stay with it? The will is just quieted down. It's sort of, the divine energy sort of grasped hold of it and says, I'm going to put this in my pocket so it doesn't bother you anymore. And this kind of prayer is way beyond the, what he calls it, joyful or joyous inebriation, he calls it. Joyous inebriation of beginners, which is all about the senses. I feel so good. Oh, I did this prayer. I felt so good. Oh, I love meditation. People in recovery say they do step 11. Oh, I love meditation. It makes me feel so much better. And I say to them, well, good. I'm glad it does. But just know that sometimes it'll pass, but it's not your fault. Well, they don't get that generally. And so when it passes and they don't feel good anymore, I say, well, heck with them. I'm not going to do that anymore. It's all about them. Beginners, it's all about yourself. That's what beginning is about. Ultimately, it's about your relationship with someone else, which is this divine power, this energy. And as it connects more deeply with your heart, it will then transform you so you are more connected with others. You are better, you become better at service, being of service to others for their sake, not for the results that will make you feel better, and so on and so forth. It's all interconnected. This deep prayer will always connect you with the world around you. So quietude, the prayer quiet, you have quietude, right? Yeah. It's an attentive, you're aware of it. It's an attentive look, but not seeing. It's a movement of love. That's what I mean by look. It's not a look, I look. You're not like seeing something. You're experiencing something. Now, what happens if it, just seems to go away? Don't get into what we often get into. I did something wrong. I must have done something wrong. I got to figure out how to do this right. I want to get back there. Remember, that's all about you. This is a dryness, I guess, is best, because I have been talking about this prayer being wet, but it's kind of a blondness. It's often called dry prayer, although I'm not sure what wet prayer is, but it's often called dry prayer. That just dry is, I thirst and I can't get satisfaction. I can't get no satisfaction, say the Stones. And if you're too young to know who the Stones are, well, so be it. But in any case, it's don't try to abridge it or get by it. It's not as if you did anything wrong. It's God, or this power, this energy that for one reason or another is suddenly seeming to leave you blah, as if I close my eyes, I look, nothing. My mind is wandering, my will is vacillating, and so on and so forth. What's going on? What did I do? You didn't do anything wrong. God is moving you along. One of the reasons it could be is so that you don't ever get a hold of it's your doing. You don't ever think you got control. You got the power. You're not the power. You relate to the power. So it's just a dry period. And the worst thing you can do is give up, which is why you often need a spiritual guide or a prayer sponsor or a sponsor of some sort who has been through this. And then you say, hey, I was really enjoying my prayer. I was loving this. It was great. I thought I was a spiritual giant. And now it's all boring and dull and empty. So what? And they can tell, oh, that's part of it. That's it. You're on the way. You're actually on the way. Things are really working out. So we usually don't think that about anything. If it doesn't make us feel good, it must not be working out. And God really wants us to get away from that. And sometimes we need to have a blah, and maybe a blah for a while. And some of the best saints had years of blah. Well, thank God I'm not a saint, so I doubt I'll ever get years of blah. But I'll get whatever blah God wants me to have. So ultimately, God alone introduces you to this mystical contemplation. God will introduce you to it, which means when you are ready, God will introduce you. And the best way to get ready, try to live a good life and to give time to the prayer. And if there is a trial, such as a dry period, and you'll know it's a dry period because you used to have, I guess, a wet period. You used to have a period when really all the things I talked about were happening. You were having active contemplation. You were having affective prayer. And you were drawn into the darkness. And so it was all working. And now it isn't. So it's a trial, if you will, to see how committed you're going to be. Yeah, I've often said, we say God loves us unconditionally. And the question is, how unconditional is our love? Well, it won't immediately become unconditional. So it takes a lot. So don't get discouraged. It's for humility. We hate humility, right? Humility is to remind us that it's God's doing in God's time, and you are powerless. You're not powerless to show up. You're not powerless to give the time. You're not powerless to let go of chores and so-called duties. I have no time for prayer and so on. You're not powerless for that. But you are powerless about what happens in the time that you give to this prayer. Now, this prayer may, at least Lahudi thinks so, this prayer may develop, may more likely come about, this deeper prayer that I've been talking about, as we develop a more virtuous life. So if you were in a recovery program and you jumped into step 11, and before you had really changed your behavior, you might have some good initial experiences, but then it'll all dry up because your life of being kind, loving, compassionate, forgiving, accepting, of service to others hasn't really happened. You only did step 11. You only did any of them because it makes you feel better. Well, that's a start. But step 11 will sort of fade into this. And if you're practicing no bit of spiritual life, you will not have an ongoing deep relationship with this prayer. So you will read about people who had sudden enlightenment. They read about this in Buddhism. Sudden enlightenment, didn't do anything. They didn't meditate, didn't know Zazen, nothing. And all of a sudden they have sudden enlightenment. It'll pass. They had a sudden enlightenment, but they don't do anything. If their life doesn't begin to change in their active behavior, that enlightenment is gone. So you can have a good experience, but it won't be ongoing and therefore not transformative. So you're trying to work on your daily life. And I said, don't outrun grace. Grace is really this power, the energy of this power now beginning to work on your innards, your faults, your shortcomings, your character defects, your vices, your bad habits, beginning to work on those things. Because what you used to do is, I'm going to be a better person. And you're not a better person because you wanted it, but you don't have the power to do it. This prayer gives you the power. It is the power. And you begin to take this divine spiritual energy, or as I say in my tradition, the godness of it all. You start godding. Godding is a verb. You start godding in your life with other people, living in a way that you care about them and not about your own pleasures, which is exactly what the prayer was about. So, and then I think the prayer will develop as you develop. So they will work together. So a lot of that mental prayer I was talking about last time is helping us to change our lives sufficiently enough so that we become more open to this surrender. Really, this contemplative prayer is a surrender. And if you're not practicing surrender, the other 23 and a half hours a day, some surrender in terms of your relationships with others. How can you expect the prayer to be one of surrender? Little time of surrender now, and then the rest is all about me, getting mine. So Lahudi says, beginners meditate. Well, beginners talk and ask for things. They petition, they beg. Then maybe they say thank you if they remember. But he says beginners meditate. Well, in terms of this deeper prayer, meditation, in other words, trying to get knowledge from reading the book, scriptures, and so on and so forth. As you get more proficient, you become this contemplative. And then eventually, he calls it the more perfect. I'll not get there. They live in union and love with God. They live that all day long with themselves and with others. So, but this dryness that you may get is so that you might renounce your greed for consolations. We love consolations. We love to sit. I mean, a monastery, give me a break. I get to sit in a monastery, have some great consolation. Then the next time I am just, wow. You say, how can you have these kind of ways and thoughts? You're in a monastery. Believe me, they go with you wherever you go. Monasteries they're not the magic kingdom. So just renounce your greed for consolations. Let God do the work, because whatever happens in the prayer, you're going to learn something from it, because God's at work. It's not as if, I found myself thinking, Father, for the whole half hour about this, that, and the other thing. I says, well, don't worry about it. God will work with that. In other words, Thomas Keating often says, God takes you where you are and works with what you got. So don't worry about it. And so I stopped worrying about, I'd like it not to be. I feel like a jerk, but I'd be reminded by people like Lahudi and many others, Thomas Keating, God's at work. You just didn't experience God's at work. And often the next time I sit, it's wonderful. I says, where was that spacey, crazy thinking guy that was, the last time? So God's at work, but don't try to hold on to those consolations. But God is dynamic, not static, as is the relationship. So we become indifferent. We abandon ourselves to the outcome of our prayer. We abandon ourselves to the outcome. We become indifferent, whether it's sweet or bitter, whether it's dry or just this affective sense of being drawn in love with the presence. If it gives God pleasure, and showing up gives God pleasure, believe me. So even if you show up and your mind is just so spaced out, or you're just so filled with thoughts, resentments about the past and fears about the future, or whatever, you showed up. So God's got pleasure with you just showing up. So, cut yourself some slack. I was thinking this morning, people in recovery can sometimes set their goals so high for the day, and they get to the end of the day and they don't reach those goals. They feel terrible. And I said, why don't you start out with a goal? Don't kill myself. That's my goal for the day. Don't kill myself. Don't commit suicide. And at the end of the day, said, did I commit suicide? No. Oh, wow, great day. Right? So you got to start out. Sometimes you got to cut yourself a little bit of slack. And I think humility is what this power gives us, because if we try to set our standards so high because we think we're so spiritual, a lot of those things may not happen. And it wasn't to punish the people around us so much, or they may feel punished. It is to give us some humility. So we get to the end, they says, maybe I am going a little bit beyond myself, and I ought to back up and say, what's doable here? It's all God's pleasure. And be thankful if you're kind once or twice in the day and you were never kind before. Okay, you're moving along. Maybe you weren't kind to everybody, but kind of couple. So look at what the good things are that are going on. Recognize God at work. If we get too puffed up, and often setting ourselves goals that are way, way beyond us. I'm going to start jogging because I want to go to the Olympics. Well, I don't go to the Olympics, so I stop jogging. What? So we get too puffed up about ourselves. God may give us over to temptation. Now, this is one of the things that comes, and we say, where does this temptation come to do some old behavior? I thought I was on a spiritual path. I thought this stuff was never going to happen again. Remember, God's dynamic, not static. So don't go with never going to happen again, as if the past is always past. You're you. The past is always present. It just doesn't have the energy, the active energy to move you to do something. I mean, somebody who's an alcoholic is always an alcoholic. So the past may be that they drank in the past, but they're still an alcoholic. So I'm still me. I'm still in my body. I'm still Terry Ryan. And I get too puffed up about my spiritual greatness. I'm a spiritual giant, in other words. I'm the guru. There'll be temptation, believe me. It happens all the time. And it's just to bring you down to say, oh my gosh, bring me down to size. And often with temptation, we fail. So the illusion that we can sometimes get with this deep prayer is that I'm more advanced than I really am, which is what we call spiritual pride. Pride, remember, is one of the called 7 deadly sins. And it's not a Christian thing. It's everywhere. Pride. Everybody's got to deal with it. You got to deal with the Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam and so on, and Judaism and so on and so forth. Pride is the thing that'll kick us a lot. I think I'm better than I am, and I need to be right-sized. So that's why I think sometimes we get dryness in our prayer, to just keep us level. But God's always at work. God's timing is never off. And that's something I trust. God's timing is never off. If I don't show up, my timing's off. So keep that in mind. The purification that we get as we enter into this deeper prayer is that we think the purification is about me having less and less temptation, or me being nicer to other people, or me purification of thoughts. I won't think so much. I won't have delusional thinking and so on. No, the purification is more about dying to self. That we have a certain bondage to self. All of us have a certain bondage to self as we seem to grow up with it. I've rarely met a person who hasn't had it or has it at the moment. And it's just all about me. And even when I think I'm doing something for somebody else, it's often because of what I want to get out of it. It's never selfless. And I think this deep prayer helps us to become more selfless, let go of that bondage to self. Or a way to think of your bondage tied up. You can't untie yourself. This power that you experience in this deep prayer that I've been talking about is what loosens the bonds. But they're easily retied by me. I can't untie them, but I can retie them by things like false pride. I'm better than I think. Or by things like, I'll only do this prayer as long as it makes me feel good. It's still all about me. So it's about dying to self. And one of the ways we die to self is when we do a kindness for another person and we no longer worry about the results, because the results are not up to us. Only the action is up to us. That's when you make a shift from being selfishly kind to being selflessly loving and caring about it. That's when you feel some sort of a connection to another person. You act because of the connection that you're beginning to feel a sense of unity bondedness and oneness with other people. And that's why you act. The results, that's not up to you. So do what depends on you. I say, what depends on me? I got to get up out of bed. I got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, so I get there at 4:30. And so I make time. Time is a gift. I don't make, I don't create time. Time is given to me. So I have to make time in that sense for Godding. So I get up early and I make time for this prayer. And be willing to endure whatever takes place. Well, endure getting up early. For the sake of what? For the sake of union with God, not feeling the union with God, not enjoying union with God. That may come. That's part of the active contemplative prayer. But even deeper than that, I want to be with. Whether I enjoy it at the moment or not, I want to be with. And generally, when you have that sense of being with, it's quite pleasurable. But be ready to endure whatever it takes for union with God. You're not trying for a high spiritual life or something like that. It's not for your own pleasures, as I've said. So what about pleasures? Well, you read about, and maybe you've had them too, I suppose with LSD or whatever you're doing, whatever happens now, you have visions, you have revelations, supernatural voices. They're not that people are crazy when these happen. They may be, but it's not that they're crazy. They may really be having these. But they're not they're not about that's not what you're about. And if they happen, they're passing. And there's no divine union in that. That really is not divine union. Don't hold on to any kind of things like that. And another thing you don't want to hold on to is your duties. Don't be so attached to your duties. What is that? I have no time for prayer. I've got so much to do. But do your duties, do your chores, but don't be so attached to them that you can't let go of something to make time for God. Because it's very hard to do this prayer if you're fatigued. What happens if you're fatigued? That's what happens to me. I go completely out, and I've tried to get, oh no, I think I was in deep contemplation. The time just passed. I know. I get drooling out the side of my mouth, my chin on my chest. Yeah, I don't think that was deep contemplation. I just fell asleep. And that happens because we just get, too wound up, too busy with too many things. So sometimes you got to take a little rest. And we just have to let go of the sense of how needed we are. I'm up here in the monastery, and I used to think when I was in Boulder and Knoxville, Tennessee, oh, these people need me. I got to be out there with them. I left. They did quite well without me. They called SOS. They formed in Knoxville, Tennessee. I didn't form that. They got this big organization. They meet once a month. They were when I was there, I gave some talks a couple of times a year. And they do well without me. Boulder's doing quite well without me. So the sense that I got to do all this work because they just can't do without me. That might be something you want to become a little detached from. And if you're not, I think God has a way of, God has shown me that people can do quite well when I'm in a monastery and not out there taking care of them or whatever I'm doing. Then I can still do the Zoom. So what's the worry about? So all these projects that we come up with can be wrong turns. They can be if they take us away from the time given over to prayer. They're just more attachments to stuff, except this is not so much things as projects and programs for my happiness, make me feel better. So this whole prayer is not about thinking, but about loving. It's all about loving, which is I'm not worried about what I'm going to get out of it. either with God or with others. So if you have some dryness, it's simply the purification of your senses, of your need to feel good. It's like a dark night of the senses, John of the Cross, if you will. It's just trying to help you to get rid of that. So sometimes you stop enjoying the prayer in your feelings, so that you can learn to let go of the need to have that. So you just sit, you just do your practice, whatever it is. So there sometimes can be a desolation. But the thing about this desolation, and I'm getting towards the end of this part of the presentation, we'll take a break in a minute or two. In the desolation, the soul or the heart, the innards of ourselves wants God. We feel desolate. A lot of other people want Netflix. They want entertainment. They want diversion. We've moved beyond that. So we're in COVID desolation. But it gives us an opportunity, because we're not spending so much time getting in our cars and going someplace and doing something and planning something and whatnot. There's no theaters to go to. There's no ballet. There's no concerts. Exercise clubs, you got to make appointments and so on and so forth. So there is time. It has given us time. And what we do at this time, it becomes a matter of whether we're going to become better people after the vaccine, or whether we're just going to go back to being what we were. God never really withdraws from us, but might withdraw consolations. So we might miss our pious thoughts or affections, but it's just teaching us more humility, more detachment. And God is taking us away from inferior goods, which is my feeling good, instead of a deep relationship with God that is so deep we didn't even know it was going on. It's deeper than our minds can think. It's deeper than our affections. It's deeper than our feelings. And it gets rid of spiritual gluttony. So I will leave us with that, as I have talked long enough. What we're going to do now is take a 5-minute break. Jan will come back on in a minute, or Jeff. We're going to take a 5-minute break, because you don't need to go far to go to the bathroom and get your coffee. Then when we come back, we'll see if there's some Q&A questions. You can put them on the chat, or you can raise your hand to Jan or Jeff. And if we don't have that, then we're going to go into a 20-minute sit. And I'll give you something you can do for that, so you don't go crazy in 20 minutes in case you don't have a practice. And then we'll open up more Q&A, and then I might talk a little bit more. Jeff and Jan, take over.
Should I do announcements right now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see here, just a second. Well, as Terry said, we're going to take a 5-minute break or so. And then when we come back from the break, there'll be time for questions and answers. And then there'll be a meditation period. And some of the business part of this, let me just come right back to it here. So we did put this in chat. And I think, Jeff, if you could put the address up one more time again. If you want to make a donation to Father Terry Ryan, his Venmo account is Terry Ryan-25. Terry-Ryan 25, capital TERRY Ryan-25. So I've been using Venmo, and it's easy for me. Does everybody have Venmo? No, yeah, okay. Venmo's cool. So, or you can write a check to Terry Ryan and mail it to St. Benedict's Monastery, 1012 Monastery Road, Snowmass, Colorado, 81654. and the mail is running up in Snowmass. For those of you who just came on, I'm Jan Scott. I've been helping host these talks with Father Ryan. He gives them all over the United States and has for some time. We also have a YouTube account. Jeff, if you could put a link up for his YouTube, the last video we put up, and then some of the prior ones that other people recorded, we also added them in the favorites, and they're quite good. I watched the last week's before I attended this one so that I could kind of get what was going on. So you can go to the YouTube account too. So, and then one more time, the Venmo account is Terry-Ryan-25, or his you can mail a check if you want to St. Terry Ryan, St. Benedict's Monastery. Okay, and that is it. And we'll take a five-minute break or so, and then we'll come back for questions and answers, which you can put in. And maybe too, when we come back for questions and answers, everybody can turn their camera on, and then we can kind of see. We know that you're not in the dark side. And Father Ryan has returned. Time now for questions and answers. So you can unmute your mic, shout your question out, or you can put it in chat. You can turn your camera on, and this way we'll know who you are. You can also change your where it says name. If you want to, you can also put the city that you're in. That's always fun to know where everybody's from. So if there are any questions right now, let's see, just type them in chat. Terry will see them, right? So, or you can
I don't know. I guess so.
You saw them last week.
I'm looking.
Okay.
I should look at the bottom of chat after the
the
sites that you listed of 2 previous talks.
These, that your YouTube account right there. How about that?
Is that my YouTube account?
That is your YouTube account. Yeah, thank Jeff for that, because he did a great job in
without you and Jeff, I am.
We set up a Gmail for you, and then set up a new YouTube account, and then Jeff takes these videos off of Zoom, edits them up, and puts them on there.
All right. So, I am now going to tell you, most of the people that I see that are here know what to do, but just in case, I'm going to give you something to do for 20 minutes. Oh, there's Terry Schroba. I'm going to give you something to do for 20 minutes in case you don't know what to do, so that you don't just leave and go get a cup of coffee because you're going crazy. I suggest, if you have your own way of sitting or lying down or however you do it, go right ahead. I suggest that you sit in a comfortable chair, mostly so that you don't think about your body or think as little about your body as need be, or your discomfort. Then I would suggest you close your eyes. If you have a method that opens your eyes, please use it. But if you don't know what to do, close your eyes and just notice your breathing, because that's what you're doing. Just notice your breathing. And say to yourself, let my breathing remind me of why I'm sitting here, which is what? To be open to the presence and the power within. So then you just sit. Now say you find yourself in the middle of a fantasy or a scenario, some resentment of the past, some wondering about what you're going to do later today. Usually you're in the middle of it when you notice it, rather than say, oh, shoot, I screwed up, or I got to stop this, which is just another thought. Just notice your breathing again, because your breathing is to remind you of why you're sitting, to be open to the presence within you. And let this presence do all the work. Otherwise, you just sit. Okay? There we go. And I'm going to keep the time, which means I got to go get my cell phone. 1 minute here. Here it is. Oops. got almost no power, but we worry about that now. Okay, I'm going to set it for 20 minutes. I know, I'm going to hook you up. All right. Let me get the 20 minutes because it's going to be a little ring. All right, so now close your eyes and get ready for how are you going to do it. And you have made us for yourself. Our hearts are restless till they rest in you. There you go. 20 minutes. Okay, when you're ready, just open your eyes, or 20 minutes are up. And it looks like everybody stayed with it. I don't think we lost anybody. So I'm going to, I've got the chat thing I can see. So if you want to ask any questions there or otherwise. But otherwise, I am going to reiterate and keep us focused on what I've been talking about today. There's more, and so we'll just have another meeting down the road in which we'll continue on the depth of contemplative prayer. But some of the highlights is you have to give it the time. This is my opinion, but I think it's agreed to by many, including Lahudi, Vitalis Lahudi, the Carmelite. I think you have to give it the time. So on your side is a certain discipline. And I don't think we'll discipline ourselves unless we want it. And I don't think, unfortunately for many of us, we won't want it until we've tried other things that didn't work. That's often what happens. So if you've had some messes in your life, this is the light to the darkness. God is saying, okay, we can work with this mess or this disaster, this train wreck, and then we might give ourselves the time. It's a little bit like if you know that you should walk, that it's good exercise, but you don't do it. And then you go to your doctor, and your doctor says, we ran some tests, and you've got this, that, and the other thing. And you go, oh, that's not too good. He says, well, no, that's not too good, but here's how you can make some of it go away, if not all of it. Walk. Now we are just disciplined to walk because of what has happened to us. The past is sometimes has something of a gift for the present and the future. So I found myself a long time ago getting involved in this kind of prayer, silence, and stillness. I just was attracted to it. And I think I was attracted to it because there was just something that wasn't, there was, I don't want to call it an emptiness. I mean, I was either studying to be, it was before I went to the seminary. I think it's just been a great deal a part of my life from when I was a little boy, if that. Just kind of being comfortable being with me and sensing that that's okay. That was the start of it. So when someone started talking about silence and stillness and just being without a lot of other things, I said, oh, okay, so there's something to do. So there's always got to be a little bit of an emptiness or a little bit of a kind of a calling, a desire. Because obviously not everybody practices this, not everybody's interested. But when you feel the draw, and just by the fact that you're listening to me today, or you find yourself reading a book that has the word silence or solitude, and not a self-help book, because this is a relationship, then you are probably called to do something. So you have to give the discipline to it on a daily basis, or most days. And so you have to figure out, when am I going to do it? And you figure it out based upon your metabolism and the things that you have to do. I'm no good at this at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I just go to sleep. or I fall asleep. So there's certain times it just doesn't work. I'm great in the morning and I'm great late afternoon. That's my biorhythms, okay? It's the way it is. And so I just have to put certain things aside so that I do it. Then when you do it, it's not all about you. It's not all about feeling good. A lot of people get involved in spiritual practice to feel better. It's okay. It's a start. It's often the reason that we get involved. We haven't evolved spiritually, if you will, to want to do anything selflessly. I mean, people get involved in recovery programs because they're sick and tired of the mess of their lives from drinking, drugging, sex, pornography, food, whatever it is. And but if they really want to feel better, and somebody says, "Well, you're going to have to be of service to others," well, forget that. I'll go someplace else. Thank you very much. That comes later. So sure, it starts out with wanting to feel better. Why not? I mean, we're human beings. We don't do this thing to feel worse. And overall, your life will be better, even though sometimes. So you do it for whatever reason you do it. But then as you enter into the depths of this prayer, as you let yourself be drawn into it, don't worry about the results of any one day. The results are not important. They're not your job. Your job is to show up. Over a period of time, this kind of praying will work in your life. How do you know? You will become a better person. How will you know you're a better person? Probably other people will tell you. They'll say, you know, Terry, you're not as much of a jerk as you used to be. You don't look so as you used to look. Things like that. You may not even quite notice it yourself, but other people will notice it and they will say something. Your relationships with others might begin to go, some others, I mean, some people you just are too lethal. But your relationships with others may go better because you no longer are upset by the results of what you do. You just do something because of this energy within you, this kind of lovingness within you that connects you with the world around you, but you're not concerned about the results. It's not your job. Your job is to show up and to act in a loving fashion. But don't say, I got to do that. That will come with the recovery of your life in this meditation that deepens and deepens. So don't be concerned with what goes on in any one time in the prayer. That's not important. The only job you really can do is to show up and have some kind of a method that you're going to do for the prayer. I said use one book. It's a nice way to segue. But don't feel you have to read whatever the chapter is or the page. It's just to segue you from wherever you are in your active thoughts, whatever, to where you can quiet down. And if a word jumps at you, you'll feel a nudge, an intuitive sense to put down the book and just be still. Now, a lot of our Westerners, we have trouble with that because we feel we have to finish things. That's our neuroses. But you don't have to finish the chapter. You don't have to finish anything. You only have to finish the time you put aside for this prayer and do it. If you don't need a book, don't use a book. It's just, you might have a book in case you're really scattered so that you pick it up if you think you need it, but you don't need to start out with it. Just see how it feels to sit quietly. The invitation is from God. You're just showing up. The invitation to how this prayer is going to go will come from God. So keep that in mind, okay? So it's not about you feeling good. And if you'd like to feel good, but it's not about your personal pleasure. You're beginning to move into, if it pleases God, it pleases God, that's what I call the power, the energy. If it pleases this power, this energy, this God, that's what's important. And showing up, I think, is the pleasing of this power. So you've done a lot by showing up. Don't discount it. So you're not worried about how you're going to feel in the whole thing. But if you do have a good feeling, enjoy it. You don't have to get rid of it. Just enjoy it. It'll probably pass. And it won't pass because you messed up. I must have done something wrong. I don't feel so good. It's Remember, God is purging us of our bondage to self, our self-centeredness, our need to feel good even in the prayer. So sometimes it's feeling good, sheer gift. We didn't try to get it. But other times when we try to hold on to it, that's when we're taking control, we're taking over. And we don't really want to let that happen. So the silence and solitude is ultimately not about making me feel good, regardless. It's about love. And love ultimately does make us feel better, but not all the time. So have no expectations in this prayer. I think that's the best way. Have no expectations in the prayer. Just show up and do it. Now, the next time we talk, we will go even deeper. There is something beyond all I've been talking about, and it is what's often referred to as infused contemplation. That is, you did absolutely nothing to make an even deeper prayer relationship happen. But you can't make it happen, and it may never happen to you. And if it doesn't happen to you, it's fine, because God is in charge. So I read about somebody who says they had this, and I say, "Oh, I want that. I want that." Oh, that's that bondage to self-I instead of the we. We're in this together, God. So if I don't need it, then that's fine. But you will know that your life is working better from this prayer. You'll just experience it during the day. You begin ever so slowly to let go of things that used to bother you. You'll actually begin to forgive people who didn't change at all. You begin to accept them as the way they are. You may relate to them differently for your own well-being, but a lot of the people around you will just learn to accept, forgive, and it won't be this great sacrifice that you think, I've got to learn to forgive. Well, I forgive you, but you bug me. It will become a little bit more just part and parcel of your life. And you'll begin to see what they do. And sometimes you'll have compassion for these people, that what they did that affected your life has a lot to do with their own struggles, their own difficulties, their own fears that made them prideful and act in a prideful way, and so on and so forth. And then one of the things that I've learned is when things haven't worked out the way that I wanted, it was a gift from God. Actual gift from God, moving me away from what I thought was important and what I thought I was supposed to be doing to what God wanted for me now. So people say, how long are you going to be at the monastery? I don't know, because that's future think. And I'm not going to be into future think. I'm not going to sit around, because I spent 15 years thinking about where I was going to go next. If I was in Boulder, I was thinking about California. If I was in California, I was thinking about Boulder. If I was in Boulder, I was thinking about the monastery. If I was in the monastery, I was thinking about something else. And I'm always planning where I'm going to be next. And I was never any one place. I was never just here, in a sense. And you got to get home with yourself. And so I've stopped. I don't know. People say, well, when are you coming here? When are you going? I said, I don't know. And you're living quite well without me. All right. And that was another gift that I had. So there's going to be lots of gifts in your life that you'll only know about in hindsight. So I encourage you to practice this prayer. Okay. Well, I think that's enough for now. You can get just so much. This is going to be, this is taped. This is recorded. And Jeff is going to make available, when he gets it all set up, this talk. And you can review it. And as a talk, you can listen to some of it for a little while, listen to some of it later, so on and so forth. So it's available to you free of charge. So thank you all for attending, and thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Jan. When will the next session be held, and how do we get the link for it? Well, this will be, well, we don't have a link now, and we don't have a time now. I'll tell you when we're going to continue this, sometime in October, probably sometime in the middle of the month, okay? I am going to give a talk on the first Saturday of October on contemplation and ecology. Same time, 9 a.m. And that is, I think we actually have that one. I think that's being done by some Knoxville people. Yeah, I'll give you that one right now. You can put it in. It's going to be on ecology and contemplation. My Pope is talking about ecology, and so a lot of other people. And here's the Zoom number, Jan, 857 0160 1435. Okay, 857 0160 1435. There is no password. It'll be 9 a.m. Mountain Time. It'll be much the same format as this one, but on a different subject. And but continuation of this will happen sometime after that in October. We'll work all that out. Not to worry. And we'll all let you know. We have your contact stuff, okay? All right. So from Knoxville, I'm on the first Saturday in October, Donna. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take over, you guys.